Okay, folks, I have a special guest for you guys. Here to promote the Last Unicorn Tour, which is having a Las Vegas stop here on March 15th at 11 a.m. at the South Point Casino, is my great honor to introduce one of the authors, the author of one of my favorite books and one of my favorite movies I've seen recently. I'd like to introduce everyone to Peter Beagle.
Hi, this is me. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you for calling with us, Peter.
I know we'll be stopping there near the end of this leg of the tour, and I've been there before, several times, but what I mostly remember is coming to Las Vegas for the first time. I was to read at a library, which you don't associate with Las Vegas, and I'd never been there before, and from the moment, of course, that I got off the plane and was surrounded by slot machines, I absolutely panicked and fled to my hotel room and didn't come out until the next day when I was required to be at the library. But I do remember watching the last game of the 1996 World Series in my hotel room. That's when it was.
So the last time you were here in Vegas was 1996?
No, I've been there since. That was the first.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Have you gotten used to having casinos in the airports?
To some degree. Yeah, I guess I'm used to it. I don't freak out or panic or go into anaphylactic shock, but it's still unusual, simply because I'm not much of a gambler, and it's unnerving, of course, to see people clearly wedded to something like a slot machine. It's the ritual. Everybody's written about that. The ritual of reaching up, yanking the slot, yanking the arm, and going on steadily.
Okay, Peter, I think I have Connor on the other line.
Yeah,
Connor, is that you?
Okay, you do it.
I'm here.
Oh, hello, Connor.
Okay. Right,
Wow,
so
we welcome both of you here. Connor, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. Hi, I'm Connor Cochran, and I've worked with Peter since 2001. I'm his business manager, and I'm the producer of the Last Unicorn screening tour.
Thank you for calling in.
Happy to do it.
Yeah, we have Connor and Peter calling from two different areas, so I'm quickly learning how to handle the board.
Are we live?
Yes, we are.
We are live.
Well,
yes.
live
Hello,
as we are,
everybody in Vegas.
right.
What was that, Peter?
As live again.
Yes.
I've seen you with your eyes open, Beagle. I know you're alive still.
Oh, good. Thank you for reminding me.
Peter's alive. Good to know.
Actually, when we first started doing this back in 2001, he kind of surprised some people on that score because it had been so long since we'd been doing conventions or public appearances that it was...
I really did have people coming up to me wide-eyed saying, I thought you were dead.
Oh, no.
At conventions, really?
Yeah, fact. And it's interesting all by itself. You think of yourself as very much alive and going through the usual motions human beings go through, and then to be discovered that you're thought of as a classic, to be taught, to be, it feels... The old writer, The Last Unicorn, is dedicated to Robert Nason, said it wasn't so much that he felt like an old man. It was more that he felt like the last of something. He used to say the last pterodactyl. He lived into his 90s. He said he felt like something that really should be stuffed and exhibited in a glass case. And I'm beginning to know the feeling.
Well, actually, you've left some marks on one of my favorite stories in that regard about you, Peter, is one of the songs in The Last Unicorn. In the book, you have Prince Lear singing a song to the Lady Amalthea, and that lyric has shown up in any number of folk music collections as...
And it's usually set to the Ash Grove.
Yes, the Ash Grove, and the author is always listed as anonymous, and people assume it's from 500 or 600 years ago.
Could have been.
But it's not. It's just Peter Beagle, not getting the proper credit.
All right, so...
by the way, I also have... I want to pump something of my own. I have a video on YouTube called Wolves Are Cool. It's the lyrics are mine. The music is by a band called Rebel Lovers, and it's perfectly delightful, and I'm very proud of it. I can't resist mentioning
I'll be sure to plug it on, post it on our Facebook page.
Excellent.
Wolves are cool.
Wolves are cool. Yes, they are.
I have great hopes of going viral.
I'll make sure it happens, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too, Connor. Okay, so Peter, since the last Unicorn tour has started, how has the reception been in each city so far?
Been astonishing, literally. It's the 15-year-old fantasy of having a packed house. They're cheering, practically standing in chairs, carrying on as though I were a rock star, which they didn't have really when I was 15. But the point is that when you're living a fantasy at 75, it's not quite what you imagine. People are wonderful, there's no question about it. But the body says sometimes, I really hope there aren't too many more questions because I've got to hit the bathroom.
Oh,
But the questions themselves, are charming. Something very perceptive, sometimes almost alarming. Those usually come from the very young ones who don't know what they're not supposed to ask, and those are the ones who keep you awake, keep you from just doing it by the numbers. And wherever we've been, we've had just astonishing people, and I'm still not altogether used to it. I still don't take it for granted.
Well, the sizes of the audience have been spectacular, and the fun part for us is because we always knew it would draw a lot of people, but when you talk to the theater owners and you make the arrangements, they don't tend to believe you because, of course, everyone always hypes their event. Oh, we're going to come to your town and do this much business, and they go, yeah, I heard that before. But we always actually outdraw what we promised them. And it's pretty amazing to watch. I mean, in Portland, for example, we had 1,400 people come on the weekend for our shows.
wow.
And our entire promotional budget wasn't even $200 for the city. And sold out 4 shows, which was very happy as far as we're concerned and the audience is concerned. So we're hoping to do incredible stuff in Vegas.
You can expect we're gonna try to show off 1,400. That's for sure.
Well, that would be lovely, my recommendation is that people should go online and to the link you're going to supply or they're going to tell them about it and buy their tickets in advance because the way this show works is a little different than usual. We normally can't do anything at any of the major theater chains, AMC, Regal, Century. They will not do events like ours where Peter will sit there and sign things and people will line up to talk to him. They just don't do that. In this case, because the only theaters in Vegas are those specialty, those major chains, and the only handful of ones which are not, we couldn't get booked into, we are doing it in a Century/Cinemark theater to show the movie, but this is a movie theater in a casino. So the casino was quite happy at the thought of us all lining up and doing it. So right outside the door of the theater, inside the casino, is where we're going to do all the signing and selling, and Peter will meet everybody.
Oh, so that's how you're getting around that.
That's how we're getting around it this time, and it's kind of a one-time Vegas-only setup because of the way the theater is in the building. So kudos to the casino for giving us permission. But we can expand. The more people that buy tickets, the sooner they buy them, the bigger room will be in with a bigger screen, and it'll just all be better all the way around. And if we get enough people coming, they'll add more shows. So that's pretty cool.
Any stories from the tour you'd like to share? I know I imagine there's got to be so many ones that are on your mind right now.
Oh, they're endless. They literally are endless. They do enough of these gigs and they blur. You can't remember whether that marvelous thing happened then, or was that later on, or was that in another city altogether?
But they are indeed marvelous. We've had there was a violin playing Lady Amalthea performing live at one of our shows.
Right.
We've had, this is one of my favorites, in Chicago, in one of the suburb shows we did outside of Chicago. There was a couple, they stood in line after the movie to meet Peter. They bought some books. They talked with Peter for a while, then they turned away, and they walked like 4 steps, and then the guy got down on his knees and proposed right in front of Peter.
Aww.
And she said yes, thank goodness.
That would have been awkward.
Close the whole story otherwise.
Amazing. Peter, why do you think the Last Unicorn novel and the film has been so beloved since its release, even today?
Honestly, no. I make guesses. I say this or that depending on what I'm feeling at the time. I know on the one hand, it's a strangely comforting story. People have taken nourishment and reassurance out of it, especially people who grew up feeling utterly alone and one of a kind. And on the other hand, it's a dark story, too, in the sense that it doesn't end Disney happy. The prince and princess don't wind up together. And the really sad thing is simply that the unicorn retains her human memories, and she's immortal. And that loss will remain with her forever. Forever, whatever that means, eternally. And she can never really go home in the sense that she imagined she could, or hoped she could. And on the other hand, there's simply reassurance. I noticed that a lot of the people who come up to talk to me are people who felt very much alone, and as children or as adolescents, or still do. And somehow it's, as I say, reassuring to find that you're not alone. Actually, just the fact that there's this size of an audience that's built up and built up, and people realize that other people feel like this too, that other people take nourishment from the same story that they do. It's like when, before the Tolkien explosion happened, I wrote a piece for Holiday Magazine, who turned it down, and they'd been buying most of my stuff. They turned it down on the grounds that Tolkien wasn't contemporary enough. This would have been about 1964. And in the same way, when I wrote a book about coming across country from New York to California on a couple of motor scooters in 1963 with one of my three oldest friends, and mentioned Tolkien, threw in a reference to Mordor, because we're passing through Cleveland at the time, as I recall, and the editor made me add a few lines explaining who Tolkien was and what Middle-earth was and what the Lord of the Rings was. A year later, that wouldn't have been necessary. And in the same way, I think Last Unicorn was a kind of password for a lot of people who knew the book and later the movie and didn't think anybody else did.
You mentioned these, looking at these tours. Do you ever find yourself surprised at all the the very young fans that come up to you and just do you ever go how do you remember all this stuff?
Yeah, it is astonishing to me, of course. In fact, we get several generations. We've met people who were literally introducing their grandchildren to the book, to the movie. The movie, I think, was the leveler, if you like. It set the movie, the DVD, all sent a lot of people back to the book to go looking for the book, and so I'm expecting the ones who remember the book from 1968, or who know my other work, which does happen, but we get so many young people that, of course, I'm astonished, utterly delighted, and reassured myself that the book's likely to go on after me. That'll be nice.
I'm going to share a story here.
Go ahead.
At Comic-Con a couple of years ago, there was a woman who looked to be in her late 60s, hard to say, buying a book and a DVD, and she asked Peter to sign them, and he asked if the name she was requesting was her name, and she said, "No, that's my great-granddaughter." And Peter then asked how old she was and was informed that this great-granddaughter was 1 year old. And Peter observed that, this is a little advanced for one. And the woman then said, "You don't understand. I bought your book when it was published in 1968, and I read it to my daughter. And she and I were first in line at our local theater when the movie came out in 1982. And then when my daughter had a daughter, she read the book with her, and they watched the movie together. And now that my daughter's daughter has had a daughter, in a couple of years, I'm going to read this book with her and watch this movie with her. And this is a 4-generation family tradition."
Wow.
That's funny because
you can't pay to make that happen. That's the miracle of what he wrote.
The story I remember doesn't have to do with the tour at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about it because I was signing books many years ago up in Sonoma County. I remember that much. And a very fierce-looking little classic little old lady in tennis shoes, bought a copy of The Last Unicorn, and not even the Bin Unicorn. It was one of my books in paperback, and she came up and slammed the book down in front of me to be signed and glared at me and said, "You know why I like your stuff?" No, I couldn't imagine looking at her. And she said, "'Cause you write merciful books." And she picked up her book and walked away. And that stayed with me because I do try. That's exactly it. That's some way, everything I do try to write merciful stuff.
Speaking of the novel, when you were writing the characters, Molly, Smendrick, Prince Lear, did you find inspiration for those characters from your own life, or how did you develop those characters?
In all my characters, there are bits of myself, certainly, including Mommy Fortuna and King Haggard. But no, there's no individual who's the origin of this character or that. Schmendrick, in a sense, is older than the book, because I used to tell my older daughter bedtime stories about the further catastrophes of the world's worst magician, well before I was back to writing The Last Unicorn, which I had dropped for a couple of years. But when it came time, when the unicorn was trapped in the Midnight Carnival, I knew she had to meet somebody, find some ally there. After being hung up for about 3 weeks, Schmendrick finally walked out of those bedtime stories and walked into the book. And the butterfly, the closest to reality is the butterfly, which I've described as a sketch of the inside of my head at 23 when I was starting to write that book, that summer of 1962. And it's still perfectly true. That'll do for, at least a basic introduction. And beyond that, they're just bits and pieces, snags, but no individual of any sort. And Molly was simply a gift. I don't know where Molly came from. I don't know how I knew to write Molly. I didn't create Molly. She was given to me. That's all I can explain. She was just there. There's a French saying, when somebody shows up, bam, like a nail in the wall. She was like that.
I know that you released a sequel novella, The Two Hearts, and people ate that up. Do you ever see yourself returning to follow the stories of Amalthama, Smendrick, and Molly?
No, I really don't. Well, except for the fact that the girl, the young girl then, between 9 and 10, who tells the story of Two Hearts, is definitely going to have a book to herself, because she's too strong a character to walk away from.
Oh, wow.
I'll probably pick Suze up when she's about 17 and first whistles out in public that tune that Molly taught her.
Ooh.
Molly said somebody would come to her, so we'll see who does.
I have to offer a correction, which is it's not clear whether there will be any more sequels in that follow-up than Two Hearts and the follow-up novel with Molly eventually. But there are some prequel stories. Peter has written 3 Schmendrick stories set before The Last Unicorn. One of them has been published. The other 2 have not yet been published, and they're all going to be available in their own book called Green-Eyed Boy sometime in the next year or two, a little set of special stories.
Wow. And
there's a chance, Peter has talked about this, and we're going to try to hold him to it, that there will be a Schmendrick and Molly story to wrap up the collection. So we'll see if I can persuade him.
My friend Ashley is in the studio with me, and she's just squealing at the thought of that. I'm sorry.
I absolutely love
I can guarantee the first 3 because they exist, but we don't know we're going to be able to. We'll try to talk him into the last one.
Do you have any other future projects you want to maybe talk about?
There are a number. You start, Connor, and I'll fill
Okay. Well, yeah. In fact, there are a lot. Here's just some of them. Peter has 2 new novels in the pipeline, one called Summerlong, another called I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons. They both should be out within the next year to 2 years. There's a children's book called Gordon the Self-Made Cat. There's another children's book. It's called The Best Worst Monster. There are numerous nonfiction books. There's old stuff coming back into print. One of my favorites is Peter wrote a book of essays about the influences in his life, the people that helped him become the writer he is in one way or another. They're wonderful, wonderful essays. And the title of that collection comes from the essay about Tolkien and how he worked on the Lord of the Rings movie. We did not come up with this title. A 12-year-old who heard about the book and heard about this essay came up with the title, but we stole it as soon as we heard about the title. That book is going to be Smeagol, Deagle, and Beagle, Essays from the Headwaters of My Voice. And there's also some very cool stuff. There's a wonderful new hardcover edition of the novel, a tour special edition that's on its way. And fans of the film are going to love this one. We're doing a kind of a coffee table book, 500 pages long, actually. 500 sheets. It's going to be 1,000 pages long. And on every page, it'll be one big, beautiful blow-up of a frame from the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be epic.
Okay. Ashley, do you have any questions for Peter? I know you... let me just tell you, she has annoyed her family so long with the constant repeating screenings of this movie at her house.
I have the original VHS. I have the book now, and I also have the DVD re-release of it. I have watched this thing since I was like a little kid nonstop. I don't even know how many times I've watched it, and I've lost count. But it's always been my favorite movie, even as a little girl, because like you were bringing up the whole feeling alone thing, that's how I kind of felt when Amalthea, the unicorn, and everything.
Yes. And that name comes out of Greek mythology, by the way.
I knew it. Okay, I'm curious. What came up with the idea of the Red Bull?
The Red Bull literally comes from a painting. A favorite cousin of mine, when she was 18 or so and I was 17, married a Spanish painter who hooked me into helping him out putting a fashion show together in New York City. The actual physical labor of the show, setting it up, nailing down runways and so on. And at the end of the summer, he couldn't pay me, but he gave me one of his own paintings. This is the summer of 1956, and I've had that painting ever since. It's a painting of unicorns fighting bulls, and one of the bulls is red. And as far as I know, that was my first sight of the Red Bull.
Nice.
If anybody wants to see that painting, if they own either one of if they own the Blu-ray from the last couple of years or the DVD going back as far as 2007, in the gallery extras part of both those discs, one of the images is that painting.
Okay, Peter. Now, this is my personal question because ever since I first saw the movie, and when I first got the book, there was one line I searched for just to see, is this really in there? Can you please explain to me? Have a taco.
Do you know that's probably the line I get asked to write down when I'm signing books, more often than any other. The fact is, I think of it as a 5:30 p.m. line. I was living in the country then, and I worked the barn, the house was some 100 yards or so from my workplace, which was a barn. It was mostly filled with assorted car and motorcycle junk, which my son and his friends used to, pour over and bang on every afternoon, most afternoons. But I had a small office at the end of the barn, which I shared with my cat and, at times, a ferret. They didn't like each other, but it was an armed truce. And the cat would come and get me every morning around 9 or 9:30 and nag me down to the barn to do my work. He'd meow at me, and I'd follow him down to the barn, and I'd sit down, and he'd hop up in my desk, and we'd go to work. He could be there, or rather, I had to be there. The cat could come and go through the window, but I had to be there because that's where I was supposed to be. Cats like people to stay where they left them. And around 5:30, starting to get hungry, tired, and ready to go back up to the house. And it was at that time that lines like "Have a Taco" used to come in. I'm covering my typewriter, setting the paper to write. It was all typewriter paper, carbon paper days. And I'd think of strange, funny lines, most of which made me laugh at the time. And I thought, okay, if it's still funny tomorrow, I'll leave it in. Very few were funny the next day and not just say that was silly and get rid of them. But have a taco stayed. Have a taco still made me laugh. And it's in there purely for the 5:30 hell of it.
Wow.
There, feel better about that line?
Yes, I do feel better about that line.
I wonder how many of those 5:30 lines were about food, since you say you were getting
Not that many, as I recall, but of course we're talking more than 50 years ago.
Well, Peter, Connor, I really want to thank you guys for taking the time to call us here in Las Vegas. Ashley, go ahead.
If The Last Unicorn was ever a live-action film, would you ever see it or consider it, or would you be picky about certain characters?
That one, actually, Connor, can we talk about it now?
Please say yes.
Well, this is you're
stories
asking on
about
a
it.
very interesting day, and here's why. The man who's had the live-action option from 1999 for years and years, I'd never gotten anywhere. His option officially terminated unless he met certain conditions on February 28th. And tomorrow morning, I will be hearing from the company in England that is the co-owner of the movie, and hearing from them whether those conditions were met. Now, a week ago, they hadn't been, and it looked very unlikely that they would be. But you don't want to jinx anything.
Mm-hmm.
So tomorrow morning, I will find out whether or not the live-action rights are once more again free and available after 15 years in limbo. And if they are free and available, anyone listening to this will be hearing a squealing from the West Coast. If you just look to the west and you're squealing, that's me going, yes! And if they aren't, well, then listen for the sobbing.
Okay, then we're all holding our breaths now, Connor.
You'll know.
Love to see that.
Yeah, well, we'd love to see it too. And there's a lot of Hollywood people that would love to see it. For the entire time I've worked with Peter, any given year we'd be getting us 8 to 10 inquiries from some fairly major players in Hollywood who all would like to see it happen. And it's never happened because the person who had the rights wasn't capable of putting it together. But fingers crossed. Some amazing actors and actresses and screenwriters and directors love this story. It would be a delight to see any of them tackling it.
I know I would love to see the actor who played Hagrid redeem his role.
I was reassured by Christopher Lee, who's 90 now, or over 90, and fragile. You can't be around Christopher, as Connor knows and everybody knows, for 10 or 15 minutes without starting to sound like him. And so I very clearly remember him telling me, it may come to pass that when you finally do get to make your live-action remake of The Last Unicorn, I may conceivably have passed on. Do not let it concern you. I have risen from the dead several times. I know how it's done. I believe him.
Well, I'm not gonna lie, Peter. When you said that, I swore I heard Christopher Lee there for a moment.
It's not that difficult, but you can't do it with the real Christopher pizzazz. Nobody can. But
no.
It is easy to get the shadow of the voice.
All right. So I'd like to remind the audience that the Lost Unicorns Las Vegas stop will be March 15th at the South Point Casino at 11 a.m. Peter and Connor will be there. They'll be signing, staying after the screening, signing whatever you bring up to them. Again, thank you guys for coming on to my lowly show.
One last thing about
Sure.
that. It's if moviegoers are used to just showing up at the theater and getting inside, we will not be able to guarantee that. If you want to be guaranteed of having a seat, you need to buy your tickets in advance. That means going to our website.
At thelastunicorntour.com.
Yes, lastunicorntour.com. Click on the link to buy tickets for Vegas, and you're in.
Okay.
That's the guarantee.
All right. So once again, from all of us here at Press Start to Play, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Connor.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been delightful.
And we will hope this, and you'll bet you'll see me and Ashley, and hopefully a few other of us on come when you guys get here in the 15th.
We're looking
forward to meeting you.
It'd be really nice to see you again.
Thank you, Ashley.
Bye for now, guys.